Yes. No, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. All right. Let me explain the project and what we're doing. And then after that, we'll just see where it goes. So a little over a year ago, I wrote a book called The Admissions Counselor Malaise, where I tried to identify the root causes of the staff morale challenge in admissions offices. I did some presentations and keynotes and kept coming back in the follow-up conversations to like the broader issues impacting colleges that are watching down to the admissions offices. I'm a liberal arts guy myself, so then I was doing reading about different theories and concepts and ideas um, not related to higher ed and kind of applying them. So everything from the death of expertise to the rise of social or insecurity or economic insecurity and social inequality, rural rage and resentment, all of those kind of things and applying them. And I have come to this essentially thesis that college as a construct is broken. And so I don't mean the educational experience. I don't mean it's not worth the money. I would never say that. But the fact that those two questions are open questions in society tells me something is wrong. And what I'm suggesting is it used to be that a college education was seen as the cornerstone of the stairway to the middle class. And I don't think it is anymore. 25 years ago, I don't know if you know Susie Orman. I think you're a little younger than me. But she was like this pop culture financial guru who said there's two types of good debt, your mortgage loan and your student loan. That's the only good debt she encouraged people to take. And now I don't think people would say that anymore, right? So I think things have shifted. And what I want to get at is not just what isn't working or why people view colleges as skeptically as they do, but I want to go one layer deeper and be like, okay, so why did we do that? So, for example, if we're going to say colleges are marketing themselves in a way that is flash over substance, and that's leading to distrust, well, why are colleges doing that? They don't have to, right? Like we didn't have to do that. If the pricing model is leading people to think college is not worth the money, well, why are we doing that pricing model? We did not have to do that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. And Ali, I was so excited given your research to have you on. So here's how these start. I have one question at the beginning, and then I have no idea where we go from there because I'll just follow your lead. So I just start with, oh, by the way, I should add one more thing. The recording is on only for the transcript. I will not ask for permission to use audio or video because
Yes, as a researcher,
you
I'm
got it.
on the same page. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So all that said, opening salvo is just I am arguing that college as a construct is broken. Do you agree or disagree, and why or why not?
I agree in my capacity to agree. So U.S. college, U.S. higher education system is broken. I agree. Um, and why? Uh,
Mhm.
definitely, I definitely think that college is broken for reasons of degrees costing more but meaning less,
Okay.
like being worth less in the
Mhm.
workplace, being exclusive in certain aspects. And I think, and we can get to this, I think we try to tackle that problem in a very unuseful way, and slow to adapt in ways that I think maybe you and I might find really obvious or assume are things that, like, of course that's been delegated to someone. Of course someone does that, but that actually stays antiquated, and they instead adapt to things that are um things that are a little bit less of uh basically things that are a little bit less about like learning stuff, teaching
Mhm.
things to students that are um, useful enough to get a good grade and network while they're at that college, and then leave
Uh-huh.
with a degree, and then use those credentials and those connections to get a job related to that degree. I feel like college has taken on um, a bunch of other purposes. Like why do you why like what is the purpose of higher education? It is an open question, right? But I think in our trying to make that better, or at least that's how it starts, we
No.
accidentally create more bureaucratic hurdles. And I'm gonna leave it at there, but I could give a lot of examples that I think would illustrate what I'm saying.
Yeah, right. And I could too, right? Like we always joke about the rock climbing walls and whatever, but I think one of the if I can ask you to kind of think or weigh in on it from this perspective, right? Because I've seen that. I've been on cabinets where all of a sudden we're spending millions of dollars on things that have nothing to do with the kind of the stated purpose of college or our college, except the research shows that when there are, those items or those staff positions or those programs, which come with staff positions, related to kind of emotional well-being or mental health or financial challenge, whatever it is, that it improves retention and outcomes, right? And that having the intramural league, which used to just be students organized it themselves, but then we found it so valuable, we hired a full-time position, and then it just grew and grew and grew. So now we have a whole department of intramurals and all of that, right? Like that type of thing. I believe colleges are doing that because they think it means more students will make it to graduation. And I'm curious what you think of that rationale that we often hear.
Yeah, and I think they are, and I think they do believe that, and I think they are. But what I think is, I think the only way I can explain it is
Huh?
through an example, right?
Okay,
So
let's do it.
I'm actually fine with the rock wall climbing and the lazy river, wherever that is, right?
Okay.
Like that, the flashy stuff doesn't really bother me because that's that's a one-off, like, wow, don't do that again kind of thing. The things that bother me is when you have TAs taking on like the majority of in my first answer I said, like, I think they've moved to the in their education reform strayed away from the one thing college does do that everyone agrees, which is teach students things that will help them get a degree and network
Huh?
while they're getting that degree, and then get a job with that degree because of the degree and because of that networking, right? And
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
when you have student teachers doing that, um, it's not, it could be a lot of things, but it's certainly not uh, a great use of money when for example, we've seen in the data an increase in like private sector
Yep.
partnerships.
Yep.
This is fascinating to me because in my heart I agree. And there's plenty of examples, especially at MSOE, or we could even, there's high schools that are even catching on to this trend early, like Cristo Rey, where it's like bring in
Yep.
the trades and the jobs, the careers early. Um, However, those private sector partnerships, a lot of them a little STEM and techie, they are a business, or they do have business, they want to walk away with the least amount of not paid work. They just have a different incentive. And so I think when you're spending money on that while there's administrative bloat
Okay.
and doing on one hand the right thing, which is offering students that TA opportunity, and I'm a
Mm-hmm.
graduate assistant myself, so I get it. But also on the other hand, doing the wrong thing, which is not not having actual associate professors, tenured professors doing those undergrad courses. I think what you get is like an outsourcing of the job of teaching, and colleges should be doing that in a way that's so good that it equals a job. And I think we've
Yeah.
done that.
That's yeah. This is Ali. This is good. And be I'm trying to think now because I've met with faculty, with provosts, with presidents, right, in this process, and no one's really dug into this particular angle. So I'm going to press on it more, not because like it's the primary focus, but because it's different, and I want to get it fleshed out. Um, when first let me reflect back to make sure I'm hearing correctly. Essentially what you're saying is like, sure, yes, it's the non-academic stuff that's a problem, but the real problem is not that the lazy river is there, but the lazy river to fund it may have came from a faculty line, and now we're pulling in an adjunct or a TA and reducing the quality of the teaching.
Yeah, and it's the reforms in general that colleges are I what you said is I agree with, and I would just add basically the most important function of colleges is to teach enough for a degree program to be completed and be
Yeah.
worthwhile enough to get a job, right? We know tuition's increased. That's a whole other conversation of why and how to fix that. But the idea of like, well, this degree was a good experience for me,
Huh?
networking, connected with my professors. I feel like when you outsource a lot of that core connection, core learning, core identity development, everything college was in the way that I romanticize it in my head because I'm actually quite young. But everything college is supposed to be is now kind of like, oh, you know what's the best thing to do for your students? It's to outsource. It's to partner with
Huh?
Google. It's to have the students teach the students. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, I mean, there's still administrative bloat. There's still
Mhm.
problems that are, you know, there's still high tuitions. There's still declining rate of young boys finishing programs.
Yep.
Um, and it's like I just feel like there's a lot of easy solutions that I'm not against in principle, but they're not
Huh?
attacking the core rot of like quality of instruction is a good one, but um yeah, definitely. Like, if anything else, your college should be teaching you the skills to complete your program enough to get a job. I keep saying it over and over because that is how you know a college fails. A high school fails if there are fights in the hallway and the teachers were bad. A college fails if the degree didn't do anything for that person, and so the little brother learns like, oh, well, I don't really trust college and then the
Okay.
cycle works.
All right. So I want to play the devil's advocate position here, which is I've been in the admission side, right? I've seen the market research, and the number of families that are choosing the college to go to based on quality of instruction is very low, right? Whereas choosing on amenities, resources, the food served in the dining hall is much higher. And I think that is kind of driving some of the resource allocation decisions. I'm curious what you think of, presume that data that you had access to it and it's valid and blah 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 blah, right?
No,
Um,
it is. It is.
yeah. So what how do you think colleges should react to that reality?
Yeah. I think all of that is fine as long as they're addressing the core problem. And when I say
Uh,
core, the core rot, and when I say the core rot, it's grades are and I'm not I can't say this is like a problem across the board so much that it's a crisis like in K-12, but like grades not being as good as they used to be, um, and quality of instruction not being as good as it used to be. And the reason that like these amenities are very attractive and worth spending money on and do bring in students is because you're bringing the child that you love out of your house into a four-year institution and you want to make sure that they're it's a huge transformation outside of the classroom thing. But I
mhm.
think when you actually talk to um, people in the trades, for example, who never went to college and they're kind of have this attitude like, ha, now I'm the one who doesn't have debt, and it's kind of like
Yeah.
even amongst some of our richest people, there's this kind of snobby attitude of like, oh, like so and so dropped out of college, and this kind of idea of like I was in, you know, you could just make a business, and all these kind of shortcuts, all this kind of diminishing attitudes towards college. I think it's because whether it, let me put it this way. I think I could clear up everything I'm trying to say
Yeah.
with this like one sentence. The higher ed system has become too much about access to credentials. And I
Hey,
and I think of course you're gonna want the best food, lunches, and the rock wall and all that stuff, or
yes.
because you're gonna get the credentials anyways. But when it's all said and done,
Yep.
if those credentials don't mean as much as they used to, but they costed more than they used to, that is a huge problem on a graph. They invert. And that's the problem that I wish they would address. I wish they would make degrees cheaper to
Huh?
obtain and worth more in the career market.
So I want to zero in on the commodification of higher education because I think that's where you're going. Access to credentials. There, I don't know when it started, but certainly when I was in high school, there were posters on the wall in every high school. I think they're still there. If you don't graduate from high school, here's lifetime earnings. If you do, lifetime earnings. Associate's degree, lifetime earnings. Bachelor's degree, lifetime earnings. Okay, great. And those numbers are true. That's why it boggles my mind that people would say college isn't worth it. Because I'm like, what are you talking about? Okay, fine. Colleges, I think, as we expanded the definition of who goes to college, okay, and as we became more intentional about enrolling first generation students, we let those posters or that idea do the hard work. And we atrophied in convincing, in making the argument that a transformative educational experience is worth it for its own purposes and you will earn more money, right? So
Yeah.
if we just lean on like why should a first generation family who is nervous about that, like why should they do it, we just point to like look at the money, you can't argue with the money, right? And if that's the case, well, that poster doesn't say it's slightly higher if you go to this institution versus that institution. We just said a bachelor's degree is a bachelor's degree is a bachelor's degree. So we let the commodification go. So you said it in a way, Ollie, that I hadn't thought about it. It's about it's about gatekeeping the credentials more than anything. And that
Yeah.
credential is right there on the poster. I'm wondering if leaning in that easy way of winning the financial argument of lifetime earnings, what else do you need? Let relieved us from the need to have genuinely transformative classroom experiences because it's not about the classroom experience anymore. It's about did you get the degree and then move on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. And it's complicated because we, in a way, that credential is really important as long as they got a pretty damn good education in the degree that they're studying. So I do kind of believe that like it is a gatekeeping thing, and I do kind of think that at the end of the day, that a degree is a degree. Like I get where those sentiments come from,
Huh?
but the I see there's something not computing in my head when we go to quality of instruction and classroom experiences because and it's a tricky thing. So
Yeah.
excuse me for not having it like all toyed out, but the the idea being that we have this is a great example. I think a solid example that most people who are doing well for themselves can relate to. We seem to be sending our best and brightest into, what would you say, law and medicine and maybe computer science or something like
Engineering.
that.
I'd throw in engineering. Yeah.
Engineering, right? And so a lot of there's a lot of different ways to get that engineering degree. And some of them are going to cost a lot when you're a kid and you didn't get those early supports of and you weren't on the robotics team in high school and you
Yeah.
don't have the interpersonal skills when you're at an MSOE and they're throwing career people in your face and it's such a gold mine of being set for life, but you're just concerned about being awkward in your dorm. You're not used to trimesters back then, right? The medical student, I mean, I'm still baffled to this day of the all the schooling they have to go through just to get to residency, and then it's slave shifts. And
Yeah.
even then they kind of gatekeep the credentialism by being like, I've heard I'm working on a study where I'm like interviewing different med students across different disciplines, and I've heard them say like, yeah, I was doing my rotations and they told me like in a couple months I need to be at so and so. And so I just had to find a place to live in a couple months. And
Yeah.
if I mean, he's like, I worked it out, but if we want people to be the best doctors, they have to have the ideas, they have to come from similar backgrounds as their patients. Medicine is a good example of like only the people who are already coming from a very wealthy home can afford to take on that burden, or to do internships for free. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the best things about college, we can sense that those things are changing. Um, but I also think it's a little bit blown up in people's heads because getting a college degree will still like 100 times your likelihood of making like way more money. You know, it's still a
Yeah.
huge, yeah.
Yep.
I go off topic there because
No, no, no. This is good. But what I'm curious, I want to get in. I Provosts are all faculty, and for the longest time, although it's changing, but presidents usually came from provost seats, right? Now that's changed a lot, and that I get it, and maybe that's part of the issue. But why do you think colleges like why are they letting their academic experience? Why are they letting it rot, as you said? Like what? Why?
provost being like the highest leadership.
But yeah, certainly on the academic front, right?
Right, right. Um, I have a notebook in the other room that I
Go ahead.
think at this. Okay, yeah. I'm very much a writer and so
That's great. No, thank you.
yeah. Eh, So, um, so you're like, how did they let the university system get wrecked, like so to speak?
Yes. Yep.
Um, so I would say that they didn't, but there was a lot of situations where they couldn't do that much. Um,
Okay.
like for example, we do have states that cut public funding, right? And
Yep.
when public funding gets cut, what do? You find other ways to get those resources in.
Mhm.
But those resources are the same private sector, uh, not all completely good faith interest partnerships into public schooling that can one-side the relationships and at the end of the day not notice that the quality of learning or the actual spirit of academia is dying because that's not where they're coming from, you know? You're getting less education nerds running the
Mhm.
education nerd mission, you know? And
Huh?
that's a big one, and I could go deep into that, but I would also say like large regular tuition hikes. I think there's like when people are having trouble with school and people are the kind of the idea of the university no longer being a public good
Mhm.
is something
Yep.
that in my generation never existed, right? Maybe in your generation, but I'd bet even older. that like the university like is a public good was just like a thing. It's just been long gone. And so all these college students, if they're doing bad in school, they're like, oh my God, like this is so I can get a job and be okay for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
At a time where they're being introduced to alcohol and all sorts of things, and becoming more shut-ins, right? So I think large regular tuition hikes really expose students to the cowardice of their state representatives or their school representatives.
Mhm.
Like, if you have no idea how the school system works, it's kind of like, what the heck, dude? Like, I'm doing everything you told me to do. You increased tuition, I did it.
Yeah.
And it just keeps getting higher. Increased student debt, college becomes a burden. And so now we went from a public good to like, it's just a one for one to a job to a public
Yeah.
burden. Um, and then this I haven't actually seen, but have you heard of MOOCs?
Yeah.
MOOC?
Yep.
I think a little bit of that, and that's kind of like a privatization thing too. So like private vendors leveraging public funds. I think that can also be a thing it's solving, but what it's not solving is actually the core knowledge student teacher relationships that will last
Mhm.
that used to last forever. Unequal funding cuts, like
Okay.
unequal funding cuts attainments. Um, I would have to relook and see like which departments it is or if it's across the board, but that's for sure a thing. Um, I'll just stop there. But all of the
Yeah.
examples I listed, does any of those in your mind like scream provost?
That, oh, that, that's a good, no, that's no is the short answer. Um, and my theory is that the provost and the faculty, I mean, we still have a shared governance model, right? Like you can point it back to the faculty and say, how did you let this happen? But ultimately, I think the faculty, the provost, the academic arm of the institution has been pushed out by the business arm of the institution. That's kind of my theory. And that if I am, well, when I was, right, I was a vice president of enrollment at Carroll. We balanced tough budgets, and let's just use round numbers. I know it's not actually this simple and clear, but $100,000 line item for a faculty position that is not distinguishing our institution in the mind of the public, right? To have that faculty versus three adjuncts filling that role versus a new football coach or rolling in an athletic program in track or skeet shooting or whatever the case is, right? If the goal is just increase revenue, the faculty position, when dropped one at a time, doesn't change the value proposition in the minds of families. But I think what you're suggesting is, yeah, but when you roll those up over the course of a generation, it has rotted out the system.
Right. And the system being, I learned something new today. It's
Mhm.
gonna help me get a job. And it's I'm never one to be blaming any of
Huh?
the stakeholders because I
Well, but that is what my book is doing. That's what I'm after. I'm just, and to be clear, I'm trying to identify the individual decisions of each of the stakeholders. So, because I don't think if you fix provost or fix enrollment
right.
officers, the problem goes away. I think it's layered. But I'm sorry, continue. I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
no, I was gonna say to that end, if I had to be like, you know who's done it the worst, I would say it's the private sector companies that come in that have no actual stake in
Yes.
students really learning the material, right? Like an actual professor who took the time to,
Uh-huh.
like, I'm eating ramen noodles and just getting by, but it's because, I have to do my assistantship. That's the first step to blah blah blah. It doesn't pay much, but I want to be a professor, right? They love learning. They can't wait to do studies and just get those publications out, and then they become the adjunct or the research professor, the associate professor. They're finally the professor. They're finally get to do the greatest joy for them, which is teaching and then learning from their students, right?
Hmm?
Google and all these other people that are coming in and making partnerships, that's not the same type of person. And we can't have a bunch of romantic, like, oh, isn't that is yes and no type people. We can't have professors run everything. But when you invite purely monopolistic, like yeah,
Yeah.
monopolistic, like the a lot of the partners that come into our higher ed institutions, like if you looked hard enough, they have a lawsuit over some like sketchy merger or something, and
Oh, yeah.
they have, they settle out of court, and it's it's nothing that would cause like a PR scandal for the spokesperson of the college or anything. But that's
What
just so evident to me that they're not invested in true learning and whatever. It's just another extension of becoming bigger and bigger in their model of being the biggest in the game.
Well, I mean, what you're saying about monopolies is, I think, spot on, and it's making me think the whole idea of these, private partner, industry partnerships, essentially, because sometimes they'll partner with private colleges too. It that can only appeal to organizations with a monopoly or a near monopoly, right? Because we cannot and would not and should not. I'm not arguing the negative here, but because we can't and don't and won't essentially lock people into forced employment, if that makes sense. I'm trying to use my words carefully, but
Right.
you know, because we can't require someone to take a degree from Marquette and then go work for the corporation that helped fund it. The only type of corporation that would see the value in that is a corporation for whom, well, you don't really have other options but to work for us. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That does make sense. And that's also very regional too. Like in Dayton, Ohio, there's a few companies that, you know, you'd have to work for them in general. Like good luck, you know?
Right, right. And so in that case, if there's only three hospitals in your community, uh, uh, well, actually, even with three, it's a little different. I saw that when I was at Carroll because we have the big four healthcare companies here in Milwaukee. Their worry was, if we essentially are we just paying for to get nurses for our competition, right? Um, but if there is no competition or no sizable or significant competition, that's when these partnerships work. So I guess where I'm going is that model that you're correctly, I think, railing against. I'm sorry, that's loaded language. That was mine. You didn't say railing against, but that you're
No,
identifying problems with. It requires. It only works in monopolistic environments.
right, which for yes, that yeah, and that only further devastates the community that's being hurt outside of the school system by these same monopolies. Because
Yeah.
monopolies are great in a one stop, one shop kind of thing, but there are this is also kind of past my time. Like I grew up in the age of huge Walmarts and everything, but there were
Yep.
mom and pop shops that got eaten up and stuff.
Oh yeah.
The story of the items that you have, like it's everything's built somewhere else, and you know every job sells, or every monopoly makes everything.
Mhm.
Things just kind of in a way are more have less meaning, and so if college becomes an ex gets if privatization becomes as big of as a component in higher education as the belief that education is a public good,
Huh?
then we're going to be living in a world where even the idea of getting that career is like, oh, what am I going to work for? Bayer,
Yeah.
Monsanto? Yeah, it becomes more of that. Um,
You
has
want to?
this come up in any of your other interviews, the privatization?
No. No. But can I want to press on the public good aspect. You brought that up a few times, and I do think the idea that college is no longer perceived as a public good is what's driving the disinvestment from state governments, right? Plus, obviously, financial realities out of the Great Recession, blah 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 blah. But when looking at where do we balance the budget, cutting the UW system or the Wisconsin tuition grant or whatever it is an easy one to make if if you don't see college as a public good. And the cynical minded folks I've talked to have said, well, there's one political party that wants an uneducated public. And I don't disagree. But even still, this was happening before that element of the party rose to power. If the idea that the purpose of college or that the value of college is in those lifetime earnings, well, then it is a personal benefit, right? And so I'm wondering if that's another accidental downstream effect of colleges taking the easy way out in expanding who goes to college by just pointing to that poster. And not only did we commoditize, um, we let state legislators who may have been suspicious of us to begin with view us not as a public good, but a private benefit.
These are, like, I agree with you. Like that. I know that's what you're wondering. That's kind of what I'm wondering too. I like the way you phrased it because but yeah, that's a it's easy for me to talk about things that are based on precedent, right? Like this
Mm-hmm.
thing happened and here's what happened to that department and ultimately they had to shut down and blah blah blah. But the thing we're talking about here that I think it's resonating with you is almost spiritual, right? Like is it a public good or is it for, is it for the benefit of all or is it just right? These are kind of esoteric. I These words are used a lot for like really ancient ideas, but there's things can still be spiritual and esoteric and uh you know that it is because it is. And I think people can feel generationally when the the thing that's kind of like the higher education being like the flagship of the middle class, great equalizer,
Mm-hmm.
transformed I guess it would be like the baby boomers, but a lot of millions and millions and millions of Americans' lives
Mm-hmm.
um, at an unprecedented rate, and we still do quite well in leading the world's research, right? And so we do benefit from that kind of industry public partnership thing,
Mm-hmm.
but to have it become uh, sort of a sort of everybody's pointing to everybody and being like, well, it's not us who's making the cut, like the price go up or who's changing that. And it's like, well, you know, I, UC State funding is gonna have to stay the same because, we're spending, like I kind of lost it, but it feels like every person that a student would think would be responsible for like something that they would get an email about like prices going up or whatever, like everyone just has a convenient answer, right? And so it becomes a game of playing catch up in a PR sense for schools to like always not say the wrong thing, to be on the right side when there's because a lot of things go on campuses to offer the best things and to show that you're on the right side of different issues and having safe spaces and right. Those are kind of easier issues to address because they don't touch the bottom line and they don't change the things that are like, well, I would do, a corner of the school is being like, and I would do it, but I'm stretched thin. I can't even blah blah
Yeah.
blah. And the higher up people would be like, I don't know what they expect me to do. I mean, like it costs 400,000 just for one person to be hired on. Like
Yeah.
everybody has this whole thing. And then the state legislators are like, I don't know what to say. And then like everyone's just kind of feeling
Pointing
like
at
it's
each other.
not them, it's someone else. Yeah, all you get is this kind of oh, that's kind of nice if you read the email sort of announcement, these kind of easy fixes. Um, but during all of that, during the deterioration and the privatization of higher education, um, you end up you end up like in your soul questioning what's the point of like studying hard and doing this and
Yeah. All right. Well, Ali, I appreciate this so much. This has been fantastic.